it's hard to be a brand that cares about ocean conservation and be in plastic bottles.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we're in plastic bottles. And
Mm-hmm.
it's bugged me since we launched. It's literally
Mm-hmm.
been like just irking me. So we just launched a crowdfunding campaign on iFund Women to do a large size sustainable refillable bottle that gets rid of the plastic.
Okay.
So, it's just because, again, it's our mission. And if you use that lens on everything, you're going to be pushing your brand to do more innovation that helps with that mission.
Welcome to the Winning E-Commerce Experience Show. And now your host, Shahram Anver.
Hey guys, today we have the CEO and co-founder of MASAMI, a clean, premium, direct-to-consumer haircare brand, and they just launched in February. Lynn Power, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
So we were just talking about how I think you kind of got your business started just before things went crazy. Tell us how that's been.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine that just a couple months ago, we were at New York Fashion Week, crammed in a little room, clearly not social distancing even remotely. And it seems like it was 2 years ago, but it was really only in February. And that's how we launched.
And what's it been like? Because you launched in February, and obviously you're selling online. And I know that once the lockdown and all this started, online was probably the only way that you could reach consumers. So, have you seen anything in the analytics that you're looking at where you've seen a spike in interest, or how have you sort of adjusted your plans, if any, to capture this new way of buying, really?
Yeah, so when we launched, we were what I call, and we still are, DTC plus, meaning we're heavy e-commerce, but we also have a physical presence in a couple of locations. So we have had, and hopefully we'll have again, presence in a boutique in LA and one in DC. And we were in pretty far along conversations with several salons. So when all this hit, clearly we had to pivot our focus away from the distribution piece and back to the e-commerce piece, which is good because it's sort of the heart of what we are anyway. But we basically have focused on digital acquisition. We've shored up our Amazon channel, which, other than them losing a case of my product, we're almost there. And so that's really been the pivot, and just really focusing on our content and making sure that we've got good content, which is hard when you don't have a lot of time in a normal world. But now it's like we've got time. So we're trying to create content that is more relevant for what consumers want right now. So more stuff around self-care, things around hair tips when you're in quarantine. We're doing a salon series to try to support the stylists around, how are they feeling right now? What's their prediction of the future, that kind of thing.
That makes a lot of sense, especially, I mean, we're doing a piece right now in terms of content, especially because I think the way people are consuming content now has changed so much. But maybe I think I jumped a little bit too ahead. Let's talk a little bit about, like, who is Lynn Power? Why did you start this brand? And what is the brand? Maybe I think it would be great for the listeners to understand you guys a little bit better.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a longtime advertising executive. I spent about 30 years in the creative agency world. Most recently, I was the CEO of J. Walter Thompson, New York. And I left in 2018 to become an entrepreneur. I started a brand consultancy, actually working almost exclusively with startups. And then I met my partner on MASAMI, and that became really something that I felt like we just had to do, because he had been working on the formulations for almost 10 years.
Wow.
It's really hard to create clean hair care. Because when you take out the sulfates and the parabens and the phthalates, those are the things that most people respond to in terms of the product experience. So when you take it out, a lot of the, clean hair care products on the market are very unsatisfying. But he had managed to work with these chemists and figure out a way to make these formulations that were really high performing and luxurious, but clean. So we went in, we decided to partner together and launch MASAMI. So he had the formulations, but he didn't have anything else. He didn't have a brand name. He didn't have a go-to-market strategy. He didn't have packaging, any of that. So that's what we focused on, and just getting all that figured out.
That means, I mean, even though the business itself is relatively new, you come from a long pedigree of going to market and knowing how to sell online, basically, like how to build a brand.
Yeah.
And so it seems like a very nice sort of synergy there, where you've got someone who's made a very unique product and then tailoring that with your marketing chops. So hopefully that's so I guess, like, every time when we're talking about when you want to make a new business, one of the things which are really important is you've got to have a really great product, right? So
yeah,
I guess
sure.
it really helps for you to have this where you've got something unique that you can talk about. Otherwise, no amount of lipstick can make a pig look better, right?
You're so right. And a lot of times I see other founders get really enamored by an idea, but it's not an idea that maybe has a market.
Mm-hmm.
They might love it, but it's like they can't be the only one that loves it. There has to be a legitimate, market out there for the idea. So, we're lucky that my partner was way ahead of the curve, because now clean beauty is really the only growing area of beauty. And within that, hair and skin are the places you want to be. So the fact that we're kind of in the zone of the growth area is fantastic. And I think, had he launched, and figured it out 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it would have been a lot slower.
It's going to be easier. I've noticed that you're kind of shifting a little bit to get the sunlight out of the video. It would be It would be easier if you got the sunlight facing you directly. Yeah, that works.
Is this better? I just kind of flipped
that's a lot better. I mean, for me, I'm just thinking, like, this is probably a really good segue a little bit, where for people listening in, I think that was really good feedback. What kind of steps would you take in terms of, like, building that brand? So, I mean, there's no way where we can assess for the podcast listener right now, but if the product is good or not. But let's say that they've got a good product and it's, they've done some testing and it's relatively unique. What are some sort of must-do sort of checklist steps that you would take in terms of building a brand around it? How do you think about it?
So one of the first things that we did, which is not the first thing that most founders do, because I've been working with a lot of other startups and I can say that's been an issue for them. So one of the first things we did is focus on the brand, the story, the narrative, how it comes to life, but also the mission, the values, really understand what it is that we want to create and what are those pillars. A lot of times most founders focus on the product. They focus on the product and the brand is really secondary, and they don't really think too much about the colors or the logo or all the pieces. And individually they might like all of them, but when you put it together, sometimes it doesn't really hang together. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure we did is have a strong purpose. So we set up the MASAMI Institute from the get-go, which is all about ocean conservation. Because our feeling was, if we're going to take our main ingredient from the ocean, we want to be able to give back.
I like that.
So I think that's often an afterthought for a lot of brands, but I think it should really be baked into how you want to go to market and how you think about it, because then from the get-go, you're held accountable. So, just an example of this for us, it's hard to be a brand that cares about ocean conservation and be in plastic bottles. Yet we're in plastic bottles. And it's bugged me since we launched. It's literally been like just irking me. So we just launched a crowdfunding campaign on iFund Women to do a large size sustainable refillable bottle that gets rid of the plastic.
Okay.
So, it's just because, again, it's our mission. And if you use that lens on everything, you're going to be pushing your brand to do more innovation that helps with that mission.
So, I mean, I think that's a really good way that you put it, that, you think about the brand first and not just your product. Because if you're thinking about the product, then you're thinking, I guess, very transactional. Whereas with the brand, you're really thinking about how do you connect with the person who you hope to benefit with your product, right?
Yep.
But I guess for people who maybe aren't convinced, or let's say that who are just obsessed with the product, right? How do you talk about like why this way is so much better? Is it because that the way people consume, I hate the word consumer, but the way people buy products has changed so much that they're really looking to connect with you as a brand? Or like, is this because things have changed? Because 10, 20 years ago people weren't saying this and now they are. So what's changed?
I'm not sure it's actually that the brand is more relevant. I actually think in a lot of ways the brand has become less relevant.
Interesting. Okay.
But it's more about efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are so many pieces to launching a brand these days, and so many platforms, and so many, things you have to connect,
Right.
channels you have to connect, that it's super inefficient if you don't have a consistent message and you don't know what your story is and how to maximize each channel, because you can't just be a cookie cutter kind of thing and put the same message everywhere. But at the same time, you need to be able to keep things within the confines of, like, if you think of a book and there's a title and then there are chapters, you want the chapters of the book to make sense and to hang together. And I think that to me is more why it's important than the idea of a brand loyalty kind of being the way that consumers think these days, because I'm not sure that's true. But I think when you do have the consistency, it drives awareness. People start to, you build recognition. There are a lot of categories where trust is really important still. You just need to have the foundation. Otherwise, what I see a lot of founders do that I've worked with, they're going back and having to retrofit and redo their website or redo their social content because they realize it's off brand. Because they've waited to figure out the brand
Right.
until, they've had like 6 months in the market or a year in the market. And then they go, oh yeah, that's not really what we want to be about. And then it's kind of a mishmash, and it's just way harder to go back and retrofit. It's just, if you can, do it from the beginning, know what you stand for, everything fall in place so much easier.
So there's always this age-old debate about how decisive you should be when you're an entrepreneur and how you start, right? So, you've got this one camp that says, no, make a really big business plan, like try to plan everything you can. And then you've got this other camp that's just like, just go do it. And if something messed up, fix it. I tend to fall into, like, it's always like this difficult balance to go with, right? And, there's no way someone's going to get their brand perfect at the get-go. But how much time or effort, or how do you know that you've got something to start with? Like, what's that check mark in your head that tells you that, okay, this is all right?
I mean, I like to boil things down into like a very simple one-page framework where you can tell the brand in a sentence. You understand the competitive set in your white space, and you can articulate that. You can explain the challenge very clearly. You know who your enemy is. You know what your values are. So really boil it down into that one page. You don't have to do a huge, massive deck exploring every avenue of the brand and every piece of content that you're going to put out there. I'm not a believer in that, but I think you do have to have a clear understanding of your go-to-market strategy, who you're talking to in terms of your target, how you're going to reach them, the basic stuff, so that, as you're putting things together, it makes sense. Now, having said that, I'm always a believer that if the business pivots, like look what happened with COVID, right? That you've got to pivot too. So, you've got to have enough flexibility in the system to move if you need to move, and not have to like start over.
But I guess that comes down to not being too tactical with how you define your mission and your values, right? Because if your values are constantly being pivoted, then you've got a problem with the values. I wouldn't say something like COVID. I mean, you just talked about how it seems like one of your values is to give back in environmental wise and be clean and things like that.
Yeah,
I'm
that
not sure.
shouldn't change.
Yeah, that shouldn't be pivoting right at all.
No, that shouldn't ever. So you're right. The values really shouldn't change. But I think, your go-to-market strategy certainly can change.
Sure, absolutely. And that's what we talked about just now, which is that you guys went online, and clearly like and then hopefully you'll get the DTC plus bit again,
Exactly.
hopefully as soon as possible. But from what I'm hearing in terms of how you should think about your brand, I guess the word that keeps coming to me when I was hearing you talking about it is really like clarity. Like as long as you've got a clear idea of who you are, and then you can make things easier for your customer, it sounds like that's a good check mark, so to speak. Because you mentioned this before as well in terms of efficiency, that right now there's so many options and so many things that you can do. It seems like the first favor you can do your customer is not to overwhelm them with all kinds of different mixed messages, and just keep it really standard.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how complicated the world is, and founders, we all tend to navel gaze a little bit and think that, of course everybody cares about us and our products and what we do. But the reality is people are inundated by thousands of messages and on many, 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 many different channels. And there's just no way people can process the information that you think you're putting out there.
Yeah.
So, that's why it's like, as much as you can shortcut it for people and get into people's reptilian brains, that's why the consistency is so important in my opinion.
So now I'm very, very curious. I think you've already whet our appetites here in terms of introducing your brand, and maybe it would be awesome if you can just like walk us through your homepage or your website.
Sure.
And then just talk us through mentally like how you guys, like what you guys were planning to achieve and how that's really come out from the design.
Do you want me to share my screen or you want to do it?
No, that would be good if you could, then you'd have control.
Yeah. Okay. Hang on, just give me a second to get it up.
Of course. It's a little different format of a podcast, but hopefully it's more interesting.
Yes, I like it. Okay. Let's see. Can you see it?
Go. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. So we built our website on Shopify using one of the templates. I think for us, the advantage of doing it that way is because, Shopify's platform is established. It's obviously built for e-commerce. You can get a lot of plugins to optimize it, which we've done and I'll talk about. But I like the turnkey nature of it. I've had other people say, oh, but you don't own the website. And in my opinion, I'd rather have someone else who kind of has that expertise.
Yes.
And not pay $20,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 to create my own website. So we spent less than $500 customizing our site because we did it all ourselves.
Wow.
So literally ourselves. So yeah, if I walk it through, I mean, the first thing we did is, you have to understand what the brand is, right? So kind of grounding people, when people get to the site, they only spend, 20, 30 seconds, maybe a minute if you're lucky. If you're really lucky, they're going to spend a few more minutes going through and maybe reading a blog post or whatever. But the first job at hand is to ground people in the fact that we're a hair care brand. And our main proposition is hydration. So when we actually shot all of our photography for hair, which we did last summer, we shot it all underwater. This hair shot is actually underwater. And the idea being we wanted to differentiate them from all the other just kind of boring normal hair shots that everyone uses. And B, we wanted to reinforce our main proposition, which is hydration. And I'd say C, we wanted to also reinforce the ocean, which is so key to our brand and the ingredient. And then this line, the ultimate and botanically hydrated hair, the idea of botanically hydrated was our way of defining hydration so that, you know, it's a natural hydration that comes from, you know, the ocean. And from there, we wanted to get right into the products so that we're not too far down before you start to explain what it is that we actually do. So we've got our products here. You know, our shampoo, our conditioner, our styling cream, our shine serum, and then our travel kit. And, you know, we've got the little scroll over so you can see kind of the hero ingredient in each. And then we've got a little bit of a high level explanation of what our products are from a sort of holistic line perspective. So this really speaks to the clean beauty aspect, which is what consumers are looking for. And then we go down into the story, which is a little bit more of the background on how it was made, what the key ingredient actually is, because most people have never heard of it. It's a Japanese ocean botanical from Northeast Japan. You know, like I said, it's people kind of know seaweed a little bit, but they don't really know about it. So that was the idea there. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to make sure our purpose wasn't buried in our site, that it was actually part of, you know, the homepage. And we had set up the MASAMI Institute to fund research to help rebalance the ocean ecosystem in Japan and beyond, hopefully, but starting in Japan. And that guy is Kazuya Yoshino, and he actually moved to Tokyo in 2011 when the tsunami hit. He moved from Tokyo to Atsushi, which is a little town in Northeast Japan that was devastated by the tsunami. And he was an IT guy, and now he is diving into the bay to document what's happening with that ocean ecosystem. And he pretty much single-handedly figured out that there were sea urchins that had caused this huge infestation, and basically the tsunami threw everything out of whack. And he's been working to try to rebalance it ever since. It's still not back, but we've been funding his dives and his research to be able to do that.
Wow.
And then obviously we've got, you know, our lovely Instagram feed, which I think, you know, every brand needs. And then we made sure we've got a plugin where we put our reviews in, and we put them kind of front and center, because one of the things that is important in beauty is proof. People want to know, have other people used it? Do they like it? And we're very fortunate in that once people use our products, chances are, I'd say 80% of people absolutely love them, and we get really, really good reviews. So that was really important for us to make sure that we had that front and center. We've also got a little customer service plugin that we use. So if anybody has any questions along the way, they can, you know, chat with us. And we get alerts when somebody's doing that. And that's basically the homepage.
So I think just maybe just starting from here, this is already a place where we see many mistakes happening, which is really good, because you really kept it non-cluttered. I think like everything you mentioned there, where everything here is working towards building up that idea about hydration, water, and why what you guys do. So I think this part is especially instructive for anyone watching this. And if you can go back to your own homepage and think about, are you coming across with this same message? Are you staying consistent? So I think this is really useful.
I think it's what we talked about earlier, though. It's about understanding the brand, the differentiation, the story, and then just bringing it to life, right?
Exactly. So you've got a very clear structure here, right? So if my memory serves, it's like you're saying, hey, this is who we are, and then you show the products immediately, and then a little bit of your backstory, and then you talk about, the MASAMI Institute, which, is a little bit like MASAMI Institute, sorry. where you're talking about the meaning behind it. Did you have this structure in place the whole time, or have you guys been experimenting since you launched and this has sort of become something which you think works?
No, we had this in place from the get-go.
Okay.
So this has been consistent. The things that we've been tweaking a little bit is just building out the story a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we've just found that people just wanted a little bit more detail. And then what we've been doing is building out our blogs.
And how have you found that out? Are people writing to you? Is it because of the chat widget? Essentially, like my question is, whenever you do a website, even brand, you have a certain set of hypotheses that you put out there, right? And then essentially, once people are actually experiencing the website, in this case, you're going to get some feedback somehow. And I think that's a very important feedback loop that people are really missing out on, where they're not learning what the customers are finding easy about their site and which ones are not. So how are you guys applying that? Like, how do you get this feedback?
You know, some of the feedback is not specific to the website. It's more anecdotal when we're talking to people and they, you know,
Sure.
The type of questions they ask us, the things they want to know about the brand. You know, there are lots of different definitions of clean beauty. So I'll give you one example of something that we did. Mm-hmm. I've had people say to me, well, if you're really clean, you wouldn't have fragrance, because there are a lot of,
right.
There, you know, it's tricky. You know, we follow EU standards and Whole Food standards, which are quite aggressive when it comes to clean beauty. Mm-hmm. But I'm a very strong believer that, especially in hair care, people want a nice scent. So what we had to do is just qualify our fragrance, because like legally on your package, you only have to say fragrance. What consumers don't realize is that many fragrances actually have phthalates in them and they have chemicals and are synthetic. Mm-hmm. So, you know, a clean beauty purist is going to call that out. Now, we went to the steps to make sure that our fragrance was actually naturally derived and phthalate free, so as clean as it can be. But I actually added that that statement into our ingredient list because people were questioning that.
That's a really good point, especially because you're in I guess, a controversial segment where people are very, very passionate about this topic, right? Like, I think people who really embrace clean living have really done so. So I guess they can be pretty critical.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's really hard because there's no standard definition in the U.S. of what clean beauty is. And the U.S. is so far behind the EU in terms of the number of ingredients that are banned and whatnot. So you just have like a really big spectrum of how people talk about it. So anyway, so that was just one piece of, when I got that feedback, we're like, oh, we should put it on the website to be clear so that we can circumvent questions people have around our fragrance. And that has helped. I have gotten almost no questions about the fragrance since we did that. But yeah, so we're tweaking based on, like I said, if I have anecdotal feedback on just about any topic, how it works with curls, product formulation feedback, questions around Mekabu, our ingredient, questions around recycling. That's another one we actually added. We had some people questioning where they can recycle the packaging, and we actually added this point about Target, because if you have a Target nearby, which most people probably do, mm-hmm. They actually have, I'm not going to search for it now, but they actually have in the front of their store recycle bins that you can bring your stuff if like your local municipality doesn't recycle certain types of plastic. Like where I live in Massachusetts, you can't bring black plastic. I don't know why, but that's just one of their, there's just certain, and you'll find that that's the case at a lot of places. So Target will take those and put them in the right place, find the, right way to recycle it. So just, again, adding that kind of detail so that people can find it. And then as we've, grown, we've also just, had to build out, our press section. when we get covered. And this is only, 2 months worth.
Well done.
Yeah. And then also, where people can find it. So these are the 2 locations that I mentioned. And we have a salon that we just are in now as well. So this is constantly evolving, but those are important for people that want to know, okay, it sounds great and I like the reviews, but I want to smell it myself. I want to, people they want to try and they want to touch it and smell it and feel it and all that.
Is there any feedback that you got from customers that surprised you, that, sort of went against what you originally thought and made you have to change something?
Well, yeah, one of the things I'll point it out is this packaging, which people love. I've had several customers that say, I don't like having to pour it out of the bottle because it's awkward in the shower. I have to take the cap off and then pour it out. So we actually made a pump, which is this.
Right.
That if you really are somebody who, doesn't like that, and I'd say about half of our customers will buy the pump to go along with it. I mean, at some point I may make the pump not an extra, but just that's the standard thing you get. But we wanted to test out, the demand for that type of format.
Right. So essentially, it's like you've got the website. I mean, I noticed you mentioned colors, so you've got green, really good homepage layout. But a lot of the feedback, it seems to me, has been really focused on communicating as much as you can about the products themselves, and then making the products even better. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because essentially people are just trying to get to the product, and once you've done that job, I guess most people are going to be commenting on that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Do you guys
that is definitely
Sorry,
the bulk of the, well, it's also, the nature of the category. I think other categories might be different, but for us, in beauty, people, they really want to know, is it going to work? That's the number one thing. Is it going to work for my hair? My hair is thin, my hair is colored, my hair, whatever. That's the biggest thing for sure. I mean, that's why you see so many, before and afters and Instagram and,
Right.
And why reviews are so critical and all that stuff. So, yeah.
So when you've got the product, and so you're clearly, you mentioned that the feedback is ad hoc and things like that. Are you also thinking about doing it a little bit more formally now as well? Because it seems to have given you some really good insights. So for instance, I've seen e-commerce sites where after every order, they send a little survey out and they ask some standard questions. Are these things you guys are thinking about?
Actually, yes. So we also work now with Emotive, which is a text-based sort of closing the consumer journey loop, you can say. And that's a great place to get feedback on the products, to find out what they liked, what they didn't like. So that's been an interesting tool. But I have someone on my team who's just incredibly strong at digital acquisition and analytics. So, we actually went to kind of great pains to go through all of our customers to date. Now they're not that many, so it's easy to do now. And understand the feedback from each one. So she's like personally emailing all of our customers to talk to them and see, what they like. Now we're lucky that we have about right now a 20% repeat purchase, which is pretty high, especially since, again, we've only been on the market for a couple months. But the question is, if you haven't bought again, why haven't you, were the products disappointing, whatever. So,
right.
So yeah, we're trying to get as much data as possible right now, because it also helps us better identify who to target and what our segment is. I mean, we had hypotheses going in as to who was going to want these products. And actually, there have been a couple segments that I hadn't thought of that I would not have targeted.
Really? Like what?
Well, like pregnancy.
Oh,
Pregnancy is one, because I hadn't thought of it, but when you're, because my kids are old, they're teenagers, but when you're pregnant, you want to use clean clean beauty products.
That's true.
And like I said,
Didn't
there are not
Jessica
many that.
Alba start the Honest Company based on that premise?
Yeah, exactly. And there just aren't that many clean hair care brands. So that's one that popped up. And then the other one that I thought was an interesting one is sort of, I'll say postmenopausal women, because, hydration becomes a real issue. Thinning hair becomes an issue. And what we found is because our product works so well to solve hydration, which is the number one unmet consumer need. It's the number one complaint people have. Usually when you solve that for people, you solve all their other issues. So their hair actually is fuller, has more volume, has more shine, is healthier, is more manageable. All that other stuff tends to fall in place.
Do you find men also being interested in the product, or is it primarily women?
Absolutely.
That could be another segment.
Yeah, we created the products to be gender neutral, for sure.
Right.
So even if you look at our Instagram feed, I don't think there's anything now that would show it, but if I go back to, we have men for sure that we.
So what's interesting to me is that, you mentioned you had your hypotheses of customer segments and that now we're having sort of different customer segments that you didn't expect. Have you changed anything about your acquisition strategy? Or so, for instance, I noticed you showed me some content like your story and things like that. Are you like doing anything different to attract these segments? Because these are all very different people, right? They've all got very different kind of problems. So how do you try to balance all of that in your website?
Yeah, so now when we're doing our digital acquisition, we're cloning our users to try to get a better targeting. So that's one way we're doing it. But the other way we're doing it is partnering with brands like this. This is actually a skincare brand that we've partnered with that appeals to that sort of older segment of consumer. It's super premium priced. It's super effective. So, finding brands that also speak to that same consumer, where we can do some joint promotions, knowing that, 1 + 1 = 3, hopefully, because, we're able to access each other's social media footprints and get that much more reach.
Sure. And in terms of content, have you guys done anything there? Because I know, for instance, like especially with where you are in health and beauty, I think there's a very big research component, right, before people make a purchase. So that tends to be a very good source of traffic in terms of SEO.
Yeah, for sure. No, we're really starting to lean in on SEO right now. It's a bit challenging just because of the way people search for things. I mean, now salon hair at home, quarantine hair, like those are the search terms, they're not the standard things that you might normally think, you would buy.
And listen, it's like all of our priorities, like we could sit here and talk about 20 different things that you could be doing, but there's only so many hours in a day. And it seems like you guys are really focusing on the most impactful areas, especially around the product. The happier people are about the product, the more they'll talk about it and hopefully they'll come back.
Exactly.
Well, thanks a lot, Lynn. Is there anything else about the website you think we should know?
It's a good question. I don't think so. It's a pretty, like you said earlier, we kept it pretty streamlined and straightforward. Part of our brand ethos is simplicity. So, I'm really, every time somebody suggests adding stuff in, I'm always like, does it really have to be in there? And I think that's also a discipline of just trying to stay focused, because it's easy to make it a dog's breakfast. Just throw, it becomes a repository for any, any content that you don't know where to do. Stick it on the website, but that's, so that's what we've tried not to do.
So keep it simple, communicate what your brand is about, and try to be consistent on your website and any other property that you have so that so essentially you're getting efficiencies there.
I think so. Easier said than done, though. I know.
Well, thank you so much, Lynn. It's been a pleasure having you.